So this is probably the most fun currency farming strat that I've done in Path of Exile in a very long time. It's also the only reason I'm still playing, because it isn't the Crucible League mechanic that's keeping me here, that's for sure. Now, this particular strat that you will now see on stream is the invested version of the strat. Most people play it as a uninvested version, the low investment version, basically. I'll put POBs in the bottom below for both versions, but the one you're seeing right now includes my adjusted strat, which involves juicing the actual strat up with scarabs, or more expensive scarabs, gilded scarabs. We add a Beyond Sextant, because we can see the Beyond. We also force harvest through the Sextant as opposed to locking into it, on top of using one of the duplication Sextants for more juice. And we got a lot of juice this map, it's incredible. Now, on top of that, we're also using, I believe on this map specifically, we're using the 8 mod map Sextant, but you can also just force Delirium onto it with the actual Delirium Sextant and just guarantee getting some value out of that, especially if you spec a little different as well. My point is, it's very flexible, this strat, based on what you want to do and what you think is valuable, right? Now, in my case, I'm definitely relying on the harvest and the incredible amount of, well, loot boxes that I can open that could all hold something valuable. It's a combination, a perfect symphony between consistent income as well as dopamine hits from all these strong boxes with double corrupted items and items that may sell for divines when you think they are not worth anything. But more about that particular part of the strategy in the stash tab section. But right now, as you can see, we got lucky with the divine drop. There's lots of units being murdered. Be careful for all those exploding boxes as well, because otherwise you might find yourself get ruined. Now, the Eldritch combination does allow for a lot of quantity and such to be added to the map, which allows for an incredible large amount of duplication in the juice section, because as you can see right here, look at that. That's incredible amounts of juice. And it was pretty cheap to set up, which is insane. However, due to all those massive amount of debuffs and massive amounts of benefits that come with it, you are very squishy and you might just instantly die even when you have a super tanky build. So be wary of that. It's very rippy, but it's very fun and it's very lucrative if you do it right, but you have to pay attention. So let's talk a little bit about the Atlas tree. There's two ways to do it, high investment and low investment. They're very similar. It's just that the low investment tree will try to RNG into League mechanics, where the high investment will force them and juice them a bit better. I will put both trees in the description box below, but it pretty much comes down to, if you want to try this tactic, can your build do most map mods? If the answer is yes, you can look into high investment. If the answer is no, stick with low investment if you want to try out this particular tactic. Now, this is the high investment tree that I've used in the video as well, and this is what I've been running mostly with the last few days, if not weeks at this point now. It's an incredibly fun strat that is based around Twist of Fate, Wandering Path, and Growing Hordes. Twist of Fate is a keystone that essentially shovels up all your map mods, except the implicit. This is important because it allows us to take a map like Vaal Temple, which is normally placed on one of the most horrific map layouts, and turn it into pretty much any other map by RNG. So we could find it on Cemetery, we could find it on City Square, we could find it anywhere. Now, on top of that, we are trying to get those guarded Vaal vessels, the implicit right there, juiced up to max. We do this through a combination of Growing Hordes, which will of course take our scarabs and give us pack size, and Wandering Path. Wandering Path is a wonderful keynote or keystone that takes something like a small passive and doubles their value. Yet notables, these big ones in wheels, become completely useless. They don't do anything. As you can see right here, we take it off, the notable is functional again, and the small one is half of its effect. And that's pretty much it. The reason why this is important is because if you look at the hat, the top of the Atlas tree, which increases the effect of modifiers on non-unique maps, and Vaal Temple being a non-unique map, it makes those guard vessels be even more present, from 10 to 16 with this tactic, which is almost double. And it's actually kind of more than double if you realize that there are nodes on the tree, such as these three right here, that make it so that you have 12% to open them again, as opposed to the typical 6%. I've had this league for the very first time strong boxes I could open not twice, not 3 times, but 4 times. It happened twice to me in the last week, which is insane, and definitely adds up to those dopamine hits we're looking for. On top of that, we're also buffing the strong boxes with additional packs of monsters and also increased quantity. You could also run sextants that are enraged strong boxes, if you know which ones I'm on about. They do work, but it's pretty expensive for just dopamine hits. But you could do it if you wanted to. Now, the growing hordes, of course, makes it so that we can use any scarab, including the same ones that juice the pack size. So that's the foundation of the strat. Now, this pretty much means gamble currency, right? Like, we're going to gamble for value. That's pretty much what these boxes are. They're loot boxes. I refer to it as the loot box strat. So where do we get our consistent currency from? I personally get it mostly from my maps and harvest. Harvest is not completely made useless by not having notables. So we can take these minor passive nodes that get doubled for more quantity of life force, more chance to duplicate monsters, more quantity of life force, but most importantly, these 3 nodes up here in this wheel, which makes it so that you have more harvest tier 3 monsters spawn, which makes it so that almost every harvest has a good couple of tier 3 monsters, and you are guaranteed to get a good amount of juice. And of course, with our sextants and the juicing that I apply to this particular tree, which you can find in the next time code, I suppose, is duplicated as well then, which ends up being an easy 3 to 4k pretty consistently if you have good Eldritch Altars luck. Juice every single map, which pretty much means that every 2-3 maps you get a guaranteed divine in terms of juice value from your maps, which is a lot of money. Speaking of Eldritch, we do pick up the Eldritch here just to have more pack size. Unfortunately, we do lose out on the Shadow of Hunger node, but due to our massive increase in pack size, we still get plenty of altars, as you saw in the video as well. Now, when it comes down to the maps, you can duplicate them. Normally it's 0.5%, but it's 1, which leads up to a total of 37. So a little bit more than 1 in 3 maps get duplicated. If you combine this with like a sextant that gives you 8 mods, or just good maps in general, which we have spec'd right here due to singular focus. I'm mostly focusing on Crimson Temple. It sells good, but also Cemetery sells well. City Square sells well. Strand sells good. Jungle Valley still popular. Toxic Sewer does okay. Defiled Cathedral's wonderful. I just try to bind those to the favorite map slots, forcing them with singular focus, and then slowly sell them in bulk. Only rare, corrupted, and clean ones for about 60 to 70 for a divine, which also adds up quite lovely, especially if you're constantly duplicating. Now, if you have 8 mod sextants on them, it becomes even crazier, and the pricing goes through the roof, but you have to be more finicky about which mods you're trying to sell and which ones people are willing to buy. So that's up to you if you want to mess around with that. On top of that, we have a little bit of Beyond. I think this is too much beyond spec. I think 1 node is actually good enough to consistently get a boss. Without anything spec, I sometimes have maps, even with all the massive pack size, where I don't get the boss, but you do want the boss because they drop the most currency. But it seems that I sometimes get them too early if I spec everything. So maybe I can remove a point or 2 here. I also have a little bit of RNG Mirror of Delirium. You could force it with the Sextant. I was, however, busy with forcing the 8 map mods. But you could also drop that and get a cheaper Mirror of Delirium, and then maybe you can respec these 6 points into maybe getting more reward types, or maybe going for more Delirium Orbs, which sell in bulk for quite a pretty penny, or maybe even just increase the reward progress. If you are really good at Delirium, you can do that and get massive rewards from that as well. However, my build and my particular playstyle is a little slower, and makes it so that Delirium sometimes bites me in the ass because I get anxiety because I'm constantly on that invisible timer of that fog moving around, which is also the reason I am so heavily spec'd into making it not dissipate as quickly, so I have a bit more time and thus more breathing room. So that's pretty much it. That's my strat. Strong boxes from the Vaal Temple. We're juicing that. We're taking map sustain and trying to bulk sell maps, bulk sell harvest juice, and then a little bit of Beyond support and Delirium support. That's pretty much my strat. Hopefully this gives you some insight. Like I said, once again, I'll post both variants, the high investment and low investment, into the description box. Otherwise, that's going to be it. So let's talk a little bit about how I decided to juice my map. Not the most efficient, but definitely the most fun for me, but it's also a very flexible strat, so you can adjust it according to your personal needs and preferences and strengths and weaknesses depending on the build you're playing. So be wary of that, alright? Now, every cycle is 4 maps, so we have 4 maps, 4 Vaal temples. These are, of course, fundamental to our actual tactic, as we are farming Vaal temple boxes. Now, we also have 16 scarabs. Doesn't matter which scarabs they are, so you want to go for the cheapest scarabs, but you can run any quality. I've decided to go for gilded, which is perhaps a bit excessive. Most people would recommend rusted. They're also a lot easier to sustain and cheaper, but you will see soon why I've decided to up this for growing hordes, because I am forcing sacred growth. This makes sense. Harvest is a tremendous part of the consistent currency income of this particular strat that I'm running, so forcing that every single map is just a boon, and we're enhancing that with a duplication sextant. Now, in this case, I happen to roll some yellows, which is very valuable, and I'm trying to get the most out of it by pushing gilded. Now, normally you would go for a blue or a purple, depending on which price is the highest for that entire color. Luckily enough, they are the same, so pick whatever cheapest you can. It's more about the duplication of the juice, more so than anything else, right? So then the third one is just Beyond. Beyond is just more monsters. You get a lot of Beyond currency. I think 8 fusings is a divine as well, which is adding up quite lovely. And then we have one open one that you can do a multitude of things with based on what you want. Now, right now, I am RNGing the Mirror of Delirium, but you can force that up with a cheap sextant, right? You can do that if you want to. But you could also maybe do some Breach if you have spec'd into that, or maybe an Abyss if you want more rares and you have a little bit of magic find in your build, which I do not. Or, if you want to go for the actual big box, you can start farming 8 modifier corrupted maps. We are, after all, Wandering Path with every single duplicate map drop node that is then, of course, enhanced by the Wandering Path. So this is probably one of the best ways you could do it, and one of the ways that I wish I had done it. Because map selling is one of the pieces as well, of course. So, just a little couple of thoughts, but this is pretty much what I run, and then I interject whatever I have available and whatever I could run for extra bits of profit. Now, this tactic only works if you have stash tabs. So let's talk a little bit about that. Now, we all know the basic stash tabs, right? Where you can keep your juice and your money, your chaos. Like, I got 4,400 some juice here from that one map, which is over half a divine's worth. I also got a bunch of fragments that I was able to automatically upgrade into Gilded Breach, so I can keep fueling my juice strat right now. But the real power is these big trait-enabled stash tabs. Now, the reason why is because you will get a lot of items. You know, maybe you will get a bunch of these double corrupted jewels, or maybe you will get potentially double corrupted helms with like life, or maybe a chest that has AoE gems on it. Who knows? Whatever you might get, it might be worth something to someone. So what you will end up doing is you put them in these trait-enabled stash tabs. You give them a generalized price. Now, you don't have to price them individually. You can price the entire tab, in which case, divine. So I would recommend that maybe 1, 2, or 3 divines, depending on the state of the league. In this case, we're pretty rough right now. The league seems to be kind of slowing down. So I would recommend starting at 1 divine and then just filling up the stash tab. And if something valuable happens, if you get starting to get spammed, you can always relist it for a better price in a different tab, or you just sell it, because who knows? What you thought was worthless might be valuable to someone else's, their niche build, right? Or who knows why they're buying it, because I've sold things that I thought were not even worth 10 chaos for like a divine or 2. It's insane. Now, granted, you will end up filling your stash tab at some point. So then you have to either empty it or have a second stash tab that you can fill up. In this case, this one has been filled. As you can see, I've sold a bunch of stuff here. It's about time that I actually reduce the price here as well to maybe make another sale or 2. And that's kind of what you will end up doing. As you are filling up your other stash tabs, you relist the tabs that are full for a lower price per day or per X amount of maps, whatever is comfortable for you, depending on your efficiency and the amount of play time you have, until you indeed are entirely filled up. Now, of course, if you have more stash tabs, and you can fill up more stuff, it will take longer for you to have to empty them, which means there's a greater potential for an item to be sold, which means more potential sales. More potential sales means more potential profit, which is otherwise not possible if you're constantly having to delete these items that otherwise would have sold a day later. at a lower price, or perhaps who knows why, right? So the longer you can hold on to these items, the more chance they have to sell. Now, that's why it's kind of a pay to win strat, but it is very fun to just be able to just make these big trades that make no sense while continuously also getting harvest, tainted currency. You get a bunch of fragments. I was running delirium on this strat for a while. Like where I was mirroring the actual delirium onto the map with the sextant as opposed to RNGing, and I recently sold my entire tab here for over 6 divines. They go really quickly if you have a decently filled tab, so definitely recommend it. And you can kind of fine-tune the strat, but ultimately you do need the storage to be able to hold on to everything you're willing to sell. Just like a real world storehouse, right? So hopefully this gives you a little bit of insight to the strat. This is what I've been doing. Hopefully it works for you, or you can maybe fine-tune it, or perhaps have some unique takes on it. By all means, let me know in the comments below. Otherwise, I hope you've enjoyed the league so far. I will see you on the other side, and I am out.